This is News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. I'm Matt Martin, and sitting in with me is Scott Mann, the Sandstorm Scholar, and we have a guest. Sheriff Kelly Rowe is sitting in with us today.
Hey, good morning, guys. Good to be here with you.
Good to have you. I hadn't seen you in forever. What have you been doing?
Well, I've been working.
No,
I really have.
I drive by there, and you're never in the parking lot anymore.
That's because we moved. We're in a new office. So
you moved?
We did move. We're in brand new offices. So
new county?
No, not a new county.
Oh, okay.
We're just a block over, one block back over.
So our tax dollars at work.
Yeah. Well, in certain ways, absolutely.
Tell us about your new digs.
Well, you know, the great thing about this, finally getting it done, we've got everybody moved in now. We'll have an open house here in the immediate near future. I don't have the date right off the top of my head, but you know, the great thing is, compared to where we've been after all these years, we've been in a steady mode of growth, and this finally puts us in a position to get everybody under one roof. You know, I can actually interact with people every day. From every division that, like I said, would typically take a trip across the street to the old Bank of America building, and I'd have to hit 4 or 5 floors to, you know, just to get in and see everybody. So, you know, having everybody under one roof, having an academy now that can easily handle the needs of not only the sheriff's office, but any organization that needs to bring a lot of people together, and conduct training, and those types of things. It's great. And, you know, people have some breathing room, and most importantly, we've got some room for growth as we progress through the next several years.
Now, you did put a special parking place there for me, right?
I did.
Yes,
yeah, it's a 15-minute parking spot.
Oh, 15 minutes.
It's called visitor.
Yeah. Well, what about I'm curious, what about the parking area I used to park in?
That one I don't have control over anymore, so you know, you might be careful over there for a while. That building, I understand, has sold now, so I'm sure sooner or later they'll be redefining how all that's going to work once any substantive work starts happening.
Okay, well, tell us where your new stuff is. I kid you about that parking spot, but I really appreciated it. Where is your new office?
Well, actually, we've taken up home in the old jail. Now, when I say the old jail, not the original, not the 31 building. Obviously,
right.
That's the building we vacated. We took the 2-story building and gutted it, and that was actually fairly easy to do. I'm sure the guys working on it wouldn't agree, but in the case of how that was designed, that was really nothing but a 2-story warehouse, and you really just had to remove the cells out, and we ended up with about 66,000 square foot of floor to go in and just build walls and drop power and new plumbing, and it's worked out rather well. So our new entrance is actually off of Broadway. Versus, you know, coming up through Buddy Holly and actually entering that West End parking lot from Main Street, and you can't miss the entrance there. It's 712 Broadway, and they did put an awning and large signing up there, so that if anybody that's out there that has gotten home and found a card on their door from, say, a civil deputy or something, that's where they'll need to come. They'll come right in the main entrance, and there'll be somebody there to greet them and get them pointed in the right direction of where they need to go.
Yeah, if you've not been to the sheriff's office, folks, this was a long time coming. I mean, to that building, to call it old and antiquated really doesn't begin to describe it, does it?
No, and again, it was built for a different time. It was built for a department that was an office that was open in the 30s, in the 40s, and you know, the amount of growth we've undertaken since the jails come online to address patrol, criminal investigations, fugitive warrants, and all those types of things. Our dispatch and communications center, we hit the max on everything. And again, what it ended up ultimately meaning was I had to move or have offices remotely placed from the actual, command and control, if you will. So, again, that's kind of the biggest plus to this is that, we've got everybody under one roof. I think everybody, I haven't had any negative feedback. I think everybody's excited about their new digs. And like I said, that, we have the capability, oddly enough. And I guess the best example I can give you is the single largest meeting spot in the 1931 building was the sheriff's office. Yeah, so
And that
things-
you could have a meeting with maybe 8,
Maybe
and very crowded,
Right.
very crowded meeting with maybe 8.
But if you started talking about needing to do any other type of larger meeting, you're pretty much having to hope there's space at the academy, and that was limited. So now we've got the conference room areas. We've got the ability to put people in a room that are working collectively on whatever. We're not, like I said, I'm not having to vacate out of my office. The meeting doesn't have anything to do with me, or giving it up so that people have enough space to be able to sit and visit on whatever they need to visit with. So, we took particular care to ensure, like I said, we've still got some expandability in there. If some of these individual divisions may happen to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, but all in all, like I said, I think it's good for everybody that, again, we're all under one roof. And for my part, no matter, like I said, the ability just to get to see most everybody each day, I think we're in a good position. Usually everybody wants to run away from admin, but I usually don't have them ducking out the back doors if I come running through the front. So it's all a good thing.
Well, that's good. Now, if I remember correctly, and I'll throw a bone to the commissioners here, the county commissioners are the ones who decide how to pay for something like this and whether to do it. It's been a long time coming. I believe they paid most or all of this out of cash, didn't they?
I believe so. Yes, they did.
And that's one reason it took a while. The commissioners, being cautious and loathing debt, waited and did this out of cash. And good for them. That's the way to do a project.
Well, and
like
a big
this.
chunk of it too was left over from the jail project, and that helped. And that
Gotcha.
that again is a testament to how well that project went, the amount of money we had left over. Which just as you experience, and which obviously gives you guys a lot of fodder to talk about on shows like this. Generally speaking, most government projects end up going overrun and costing more money.
Good deal. We'll be back with more from Kelly Rowe in just a moment.
We have a special guest, Kelly Rowe, Sheriff of Lubbock County.
Hey, again, it's good to be with you guys this morning, and hopefully we get to talk about some fun stuff.
So you have a new office. We talked about that. We paid cash for it. Now, the old building, the tall jail, which is the 1931 jail, what's going to happen with that?
Well, like I said, it's been bought by a private individual. I believe it's the same individual that has purchased and has been reworking the old federal building, or the old post office, as they call it. I've heard a number of different things. I've heard everything from a hotel to retail and some other things. So I don't know if he's quite decided on that, and we'll see what happens when he finally gets that figured out.
Now, did you tell me you'd had some inquiries, or did you just think it would be a cool place to have a paranormal show in that old jail?
As soon as we vacated that facility, actually had 2 different groups of paranormal researchers, air quotes, in place there, that we allowed to go through and spend a couple of different nights in there going through and
Really?
collecting evidence. And they brought it back to me, showed me some pictures and some audio files and some things. So I don't know I know the staff that stayed with them that night weren't ready to volunteer for that duty again. So
Really?
there might have been more to that than we know. I don't know.
So what are these shows we see on cable?
Yeah, it was. These were all local folks, so no
okay.
TV shows involved there. But they do take that very seriously. And
So you've had the Ghostbusters in the jail.
It's been a while ago because we've been out of there since. I think that happened in 2010. But absolutely, they did go through and spend a couple of nights in there.
They survived.
They survived.
They
did.
made it.
And nobody ran out of there screaming. So.
That's crazy. I remember you telling that, and we talked about I guess that'd make a really interesting place to put a hotel.
Well, could be. That's good.
And there are a lot of people that want to stay in rooms and stuff that are haunted. So
Well,
stay in
look
the
at the
Lubbock
hotel up
jail.
in Colorado. I tried to get my wife to go up there, and she won't do it. I was like, "Come on, let's go up there. We'll say hello to Jack Nicholson, and here's Johnny."
She won't go.
She won't go. She will not go to Estes Park with me and stay there at that
Well,
hotel.
now she's a trooper. You've taken her all over the country.
Right, but she'll watch the shows on TV, but she draws the line at staying in one. So I'm gonna have to be covert about it and hope the websites don't elaborate too much.
But when you get there and you're the only ones there, that she might figure it out then.
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
That's a clue.
You hope that just the beauty of the Rockies would might kind of keep her thinking about all of that versus what's going to happen at 3 a.m. if the closet door just suddenly opens and shuts. I don't know.
Well, the reason she doesn't want to go to Colorado, and I know what it is. She can't keep you out of the dispensaries. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Of course, that's where my Agent Orange will act up, and it's like somebody needs to go to jail here, but it's legal. It's legal there, I suppose. But I always tell people too, if anybody wants to know, how legalization's working in Colorado, just ask the mayor and the police chief. I'm sure they've got plenty to tell you.
Oh, I bet they do. Hey, well, you've talked to those folks.
Mm-hmm.
What do they say? What kind of feedback you get from the police in Colorado?
Well, first and foremost, there's more out-of-state plates in downtown Denver than in-state plates. But again, some of the great misnomers about legalization is, of course, it's only partial legalization. So you've got state law saying it's legal. You've still got the contradictions with federal law where it's not legal. You're keeping those places in cash-only business mode because the banks won't deal with them. So I've often asked the question, so does, since this was, one of the main arguments is it's supposed to make all this tax money, make the lottery look like, chicken feed. Are these folks, going down to the state comptroller's office to pay their sales tax with big old bags of cash? I mean, I don't know, just, again, watching it and, sitting back and watching it in Texas, legislature again, this session had everything from decrim of quote unquote user amounts, although they're giving 4 ounces as much as a user amount. That's quite a bit of marijuana.
4 ounces is a lot
yeah,
of marijuana.
It really is.
You can't carry that in your pocket.
Exactly, but there's the arguments are there. I had a back and forth after a news story ran on synthetic marijuana and hydroponic marijuana. And actually had somebody call into the sheriff's office wanting to know who could arrest me because I had lied to the public. And I was like, seriously? He said, well, you stated that hydroponic marijuana was as dangerous as crystal meth. And I said, I never said it was as dangerous as crystal meth. What I said was that here in Lubbock at our local hospitals, they are experiencing overdoses to the number of, on average, 1 a week. Just at one of the primary hospitals here, it is attributed back to hydroponic marijuana because of its strength.
Marijuana overdoses,
right? And then you
should never hear about that.
Well, and then you get into the synthetic, stuff, which that's a total misnomer to call that marijuana because it is built more. It's a chemical substance, so it's built more like a crystal meth or something.
Now you're talking crystal meth. We'll be back with more about that. I want to ask you some more questions. Kelly Rose here, Matt Martin. We'll be back.
Dave King's out, but we have Scott Mann sitting in, and we have a special guest, Sheriff Kelly Rowe. And you were talking about marijuana in Colorado, and something you talked a little bit during the break, maybe you could talk about a little bit, is DUIs and how someone under the influence would get stopped by a police officer. How would that work in Colorado? Have they been having problems with it?
Well, absolutely. There's a whole lot of things that they didn't think about, when rushing to pass that type of, those types of laws. They realized quickly that they had to also look at all their health and safety stuff because of all the food items and things of that nature. And it's moved well beyond that. But when you talk about just being under the influence, when you talk about driving while intoxicated under influence of alcohol, well, that first off took a number of years to be argued and debated throughout the court systems on what was a legal limit. But first and foremost, you had a non-invasive way of seeing that. You could test by field sobriety testing, horizontal gaze nystagmus with your eyes, as well as the breathalyzer, to ultimately do it. You had the option of doing a blood test. In some cases, that might be the case. But when you're talking about any type of narcotic or marijuana or those types of things, right off the get-go, you're talking about a blood test. So you've already got a more invasive test has to happen. Secondly, is the way that stuff works in your system. They haven't figured out a good way to tell how close that is, or how recent it was that you've done it to be able to tell your degree of intoxication.
Yeah. So, are you going to be able to stay over when we do
Absolutely.
this break? Okay.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, I think we want to ask you a little bit about the gang violence that's been happening in Lubbock, as well as what's some of the drugs that have been coming through and causing some problems in Lubbock. This is News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. We will talk more with Sheriff Kelly Rowe. I am Matt Martin, but Dave King is out. Sitting with me is Scott Mann, the Sandstorm Scholar, and we still have Sheriff Kelly Rowe, special guest telling us about all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's certainly rocking right along at the sheriff's office right now.
So the last time you were here, you said that when you came back, you would want to talk a little bit about the gang violence and gang related stuff going on in Lubbock. Could you tell us a little about what's going on with that?
Well, unfortunately, that's showing no signs of slowing down. When you look at the numbers, it's unbelievable the amount of folks we're identifying on a daily basis that meet sufficient criteria to be entered into the Texas gang database. And then the multitude of different activities they're involved in, whether it's pure narcotics distribution to all the violence that comes in and around it. It's something that's keeping us fairly busy. But I do have, some good news. We're in the process of really taking some significant steps to start being able to address this head on and with an amount of force necessary to deal with it. And one of those is coming in the way of some support from the governor's office to set up what they call a regional tag center, Texas Anti-Gang Center here in Lubbock. That's going to come with a significant amount of funding to help us do that. But in concert with that, we're putting together a huge number of I just Donald Trump there. I went to the huge word there. Yeah. But a significant number of investigators from both the Sheriff's Office, Police Department, Department of Public Safety, several federal partners, that they're going to be working collectively at dealing with this issue. Again, we're all dealing with the same crooks out there that we know, and what this will allow us to do, we'll be able to put the individuals that are responsible for addressing these issues, dealing with these individuals, finding them, arresting them, and busting up their organizations in one room with one shared set of intelligence and instant deconfliction, so that we don't have issues going back and forth between various agencies. So I'm really excited about that. That's what's been keeping me up the past several months, getting the final stages of that put together, and we're going to be looking forward to kicking that off in the immediate near future.
Now, that's unprecedented for Lubbock, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
We have not always, and they don't. The two departments are two separate departments. They don't have to cooperate.
Sure.
We've not always seen a lot of cooperation, but what we're seeing these days is a whole lot more. It looks like.
Absolutely, and again, it's smart. We're all dealing with limited resources, and we understand that. And when you're able to merge those resources together, and it's not to say that we haven't had over a period of a significant number of years, a lot of informal things happening, case by case, kind of time period by time period. This actually will formalize those things and put us in a great position with a number of people that can get in and literally make some substantive impacts with regard to the amount of trafficking that's going on and activity with regard to the gangs that we've been experiencing more and more over the past number of years.
And what brings them to Lubbock?
Well, unfortunately, as we've come to discover, and Scott knows this, he worked on a lot of investigative pieces about this, is unfortunately we've got a lucrative drug market here, and there's millions and millions of dollars per year going back to Mexico in most all cases with regard to that. It's sad, and but we've got to be in a position to better confront that and make Lubbock a place that is not only risky to try to do business in, but is going to be very, very unfavorable for them too. And then at that point, be prepared to move out once we push. They're going to push with it, and we certainly recognize our responsibility in a lot of ways to the South Plains and taking care of those smaller jurisdictions that don't have the capabilities to deal with it directly either.
So, is a lot of this tied to the cartels?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's almost exclusive anymore. Okay. And that's what your street gangs are doing. They're handling the bulk of the street level distribution for them. A lot of the lines are blurred that we used to see, back in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. because everything's about is about that big picture distribution.
Yeah. So the MS-13 gang, you hear a lot about that. Do we have any activity from them here in Lubbock?
They're not as significant. We've certainly got a number of others. At the last report I saw, sadly, we showed that we had registered 56 different gangs. So, again, not to say we haven't come across an MS-13, but they're not in a concentration here. But again, like I said, we've got plenty of others that operate with most of the similar traits, do the same things, but are in far more significant numbers. So, again, that it goes across all lines.
So, are they all working with the same cartels? You have 56 different gangs working with the same cartels?
For the most part, again, those lines, like I said, are pretty blurred. Like I said, you see a lot of nuanced things that we just didn't see before. When you talk about, a lot of times gangs were primarily split along racial lines, and you'll see those lines get blurred. And those were usually hard and fast standards that didn't get breached, and then all of a sudden you start seeing them. But some of the insight we've been able to get in the intelligence world on some of this leads us back to believe, yes, they're all. Now it may not be just one specific. We see and have seen. Information, and we've had cases built, along more than just one cartel. But again, it's one of those things that these guys, like I said, they're not the old time gangbangers like they used to be. They're built to work for them.
So opioids have been in the news a lot, as being a lot of overdoses, a lot of. Apparently, it's a problem that's spreading across the United States. Are you seeing a lot of that in Lubbock?
Heroin, we've seen some spikes. In fact, it wasn't just too awfully long ago. We saw one of the biggest heroin, seizures we'd seen in about 15 years. But it's still not to the degree that I think they're experiencing in the central part of the U.S., particularly up in the Northeast, where you're hearing a lot more of that and the concentration of it. We're still seeing by far, I think, the most significant thing is still crystal meth, and it's just coming in unbelievable weights that we're seeing. But not to say heroin hadn't gone away, but it's just not quite as prolific.
Okay. And folks, that's the worst stuff in the world. Just is.
Mm-hmm. So when we come back, we'll continue to talk to Sheriff Kelly Rowe. We'll be back right after this. It is 8:18. We've got one more segment here with Sheriff Kelly Rowe. And so you were talking a little bit about gang violence. Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, on a positive note, this is twofold too with the anti-gang center coming here. That'll link us with the state. There are currently 4 other anti-gang centers set up. I think they've got a target number of 6 in total. That that reach to Houston, Harris County, the Metroplex, El Paso, one down in McAllen. So again, these are great resources. We've also just went through a process to formalize what they call the HIDA designation for Lubbock, which is high intensity drug trafficking area, and that will also bring us a lot of great benefits in terms of being able to credential some of our investigators with more federal authority. They can operate more independently without having to have a federal agent necessarily there, because again, the great misnomer is that we're out there spending all our time trying to find the college kid with a couple of joints in his pocket, which is not what we're dealing with. We're out there dealing with the major traffickers, to where these guys our investigators are giving each other grief if they're not finding pounds and kilos every time they're coming in contact with it, which is a sad state of affairs given, a few ounces back, a few years ago was a high five moment, for these guys. So, again, this will bring, help potentially bring some funding to us and some of those types of things to help us better address this. And that, again, is a regional effort. That HIDA was designated to include Hale, Hockley, and Howard County in it. But, we'll also, like I said, we're also going to be in a position now to better support the entire South Plains region. We've got the federal field offices here, but in and of themselves are relatively small. And they all also have very large areas of responsibility, in some cases 80, 90 counties pop. So that force multiplier is going to be tremendous when we can get out there with those kind of numbers, stay on it, be targeted and focused and certain, with different approaches to how this stuff, how we typically would investigate this. And like I said, I think we're going to really see some impressive results. I'm going to sit back and smile a lot, I think.
How many people, or can you, and you may not be able to say this on air, but Can you tell us how many people we're going to have working on this?
In excess of 70.
Wow. That's incredible.
To include analysts, we've got commitments to have prosecutors assigned full time, for these guys. So, that will just help facilitate get case filings done and those types of things. It's one of those things. When you're talking about the volume we're talking about, obviously, you're going to have a lot of different things come up. We want to be able to hit this from a multifaceted approach. From not just dealing with the narcotics themselves, but everything that comes with it. We've got the assaults happening. 99 times out of 100, when you hear the term home invasion come across the news channel, that's not going to be that random act of violence. That's going to be something back involved with drug trade. Somebody owes somebody money, whatever the case might be.
Sheriff, elaborate on that a little bit, because I get a lot of calls at KCBD from frightened people. Mm-hmm. Who Absolutely. Are worried about they hear about a home invasion on television, and maybe it was close to them because
sure.
and they're worried. Is this going to happen to me? Talk to us about that.
Well, and that's the thing. I laser in on those when I hear that, or any type of call that's that comes across having that type of a designation to it, because I know to the public there's not too many scarier thoughts you can think of than sitting there and watching Wheel of Fortune and your front door get kicked in and you held at gunpoint while your house is robbed. And those on very, very rare occasions have happened. But the vast majority of them, when we come in contact with them, the actors know each other. And there's usually there's going to always be a lot of backstory to it. Either somebody owed somebody money, somebody took stole somebody's product. The list can kind of go on that note. And then once we get that, of course, we want to make sure we're getting that reported out there so we can ease those concerns when people hear that. Because again, there's nothing worse you could think about possibly happening to you. And so again, it's, I always want to provide those reassurances that that doesn't happen with the frequency that, that it's reported. And like I said, those that are accurately reported, don't fall under that category.
And many times are burglars more looking for people that aren't home.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
They don't want to. They don't want to see anybody. They don't want somebody shooting back.
Exactly. We are in Texas after all, and walking in, trying to walk into somebody's home, without contemplating the possibility somebody's in there is high risk business. So they'll do a little bit of homework, and they'll check and watch for activity and vehicles to leave, and then when they think once they think the house is clear, then it's time to go do that. Or they're going to hit, in the case of businesses, they're going to do that after hours type of stuff where they, the worst thing they may come across is a burglar alarm or something along those lines. So
if you're not selling drugs or dealing in some kind of illegal contraband, which implies you're also going to have a whole lot of cash, those two things go together, you're probably not at risk for a home invasion. Not a high risk for home invasion.
No, not at all. No, yeah. Lubbock is still a very, very safe city. And the police chief shares this commitment, as well as the DPS commander and all the law enforcement here. Take great pride. We see it. And where you'll see it, great examples of it's in our federal system, because when those guys get here, they tend to want to stay. That speaks volumes of Lubbock, and in their systems, a lot of times they have to move, or to seek promotion, they're going to have to move on, do those types of things. And they'll get here and they'll go, man, I just love it. I love the schools. I love the neighborhoods, and I love the people. And, we want to stay here. And that's because, we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure that Lubbock is a safe place, to raise a family and to enjoy a good life.
It's a good place to live. You talk to the ATF rack, I'm not sure he'll ever move. He thinks if he can't go back to South Carolina, he thinks he's found home.
Absolutely, and again, it's just and I had another one say the very same thing to me just last week. He's got family here. This is home for him, and so again, it's I think that's just a small example of it. But we're all on the same page in recognizing what the needs and what the concerns are of this ever growing county, and it is growing fast. We may not have some of the growth of some of those some of the high end areas that make a lot of the big lists, news stories, but Lubbock is growing, and we're certainly trying to do everything we can to jump up, match that, and be able to meet those challenges head on.
So what have you seen in the way of like car theft and things like that? Has that been on the rise? Or
It's one of the kind of standard rules with auto theft and those types of things, and auto burglaries are always happening. But a lot of times the general rule is they're going to steal the cars out of Lubbock, and then they'll take them outside the county to either chop them or try to alter them to a point they can potentially resell them or do what they're going to do with them. So again, my hat's off the auto theft task force guys. They've got a tough job there, and they're a relatively small office in and of themselves. So again, it's another area we're watching very closely with regard to their funding and whatnot. Everybody that has a motor vehicle pays $1 on their insurance per month to support the auto theft task force, task forces across the state, and their missions to help try to minimize that and catch as much of that as we can.
Yeah. And I mean, you work with a lot of the smaller communities as well. Everything in Lubbock County is the same stuff that's happening in Lubbock happening in those smaller communities.
Absolutely.
As well?
And again, it's one of the things that probably concern me the most when you look at breaking out these problems is that the individuals we're dealing with are not dumb. They are not stupid. And, why expose your risk level up, by sitting in Lubbock where we've got a concentration of officers where your likelihood of coming in contact with law enforcement is that much greater when I can go out into Slayton or can go out into Morton or, some of these types of places where, and, what I say is most disconcerting about it is, first and foremost, you've got less nosy neighbor, syndrome as they call it. You've got, small police forces. And the part that really bothered me is they feel like they could deal with a small police response if it happened. And,
that does bother you, doesn't it?
That's what concerns me there. We've got the resources, we've got the capabilities to deal with these individuals. But, again, like I said, if something just suddenly blows up Morton, Texas, it's going to take us a minute to get there. And, hopefully, we don't have tragedy, happen on the front side of that. But that, unfortunately, is the thinking, the way they are approaching a lot of this stuff. So again, it's why we recognize the mission is not just Lubbock. We've got to, we're the biggest jurisdiction from the Metroplex to El Paso. We've got a much greater area of responsibility we've got to be able to put manpower into to solve.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Always
Sheriff,
a pleasure.
And, hopefully we'll get you in again soon. And thank you for being here, Scott.
Glad to be here, Matt. And Kelly, thanks for coming out.
No problem.
We
I always
appreciate
enjoy
what you're
these. It's always good to talk about the guys that are doing all the tough work.
There you go.
All right, this is News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO.